And it's being taped as well, or?
Yes. And we'll pull clips and stuff of all the brilliant things you've been saying. Just give folks a second to find it here. So yes, it's streaming to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. And just so people know, we're at tnholler.com is where you can find us at the TN. Actually, you can't really find us there right now because all the traffic from this story crashed our website for the last 36 hours. So don't look there right now. Look here. You can also find us at all of these other hollers across the state. We have 10 hollers across the state, and that's all thanks to the support of the good people of Tennessee. So thank you all for that very much. And we are also supported by Elisa Parker, as always. So that support is how I want to lead into this, because this story blew up the last couple of days. It started with actually a local in MCMINN County reaching out to us, asking us if we had heard of what had happened in MCMINN County with a book being banned, and we had not heard about it. And it actually took them 2 weeks to put the minutes up for us to confirm it. And then when we read the minutes and we saw that it had happened, and I actually had read this book growing up, I think most people who follow us know, but in case you don't, I am Jewish. My grandparents survived the Holocaust, survived Auschwitz, Buchenwald. My mom is first generation, actually lost a brother in the war. So this hit home for me. And we put the story up, and it pretty much, sometimes we have to put some elbow grease into these stories to get people to check them out. But pretty much right away, everybody was amplifying this thing. Next thing I knew, like within hours, Chris Hayes was talking about it. So obviously this hit home, and now I'm grateful that we have the creator of Mouse, Art Spiegelman. Art, thank you so much for joining us.
Actually, I'm grateful to be here. Like, I've been inundated by interview requests and media things happening the same way. If I had a server, it would have gone down.
Right.
Instead. So I think it's important to talk to the community. And that's why I really wanted this to happen. And I think on my behalf, some things are being arranged, so I might be able to have some kind of Zoom conversation in the next 2 weeks under the aegis of a church and synagogue, or church school synagogue. It's now being arranged by somebody who usually handles my lectures, so I can just do a pro bono public interview that takes questions, and hopefully some members of a school board and some teachers from the area and some students from the area might be able to join in. I don't know how you usually get the word out, but once that's settled, it'd be great if the holler could help make that visible to people in the zone.
Any way we can help, we're happy to do it. Would love to be as involved in the know about what's going on with you as possible. I definitely want to go through this and hear your thoughts about when you found it. But I think just to start off,
somebody sent me the holler. I think Jake Tapper sent me the link to your, what is it, a newspaper website, the holler, whatever.
Yeah, we're a website. We focus on the news. Kind of accountability journalism is the term that I would use for it.
So he sent me the link and a series of questions like, could we do an episode of his CNN thing together? And right after, something came from I think MS, I don't know, one of the other news shows. And at that point, while I was still trying to read it and catch up with it, I got flooded. So that started around 6 or 6:30, and it stopped for a while when I passed out and fell asleep last night. Find me again in the morning. But you said something I'm actually interested in knowing more about, because I thought, in my own paranoid way, that you guys had the information for 2 weeks and decided to release it right before Holocaust Remembrance International Day week, whatever, and that this was incredibly savvy media.
No, yeah, I wish I could take credit for that. No, actually, it's Adonai working through us, I guess. It's just how it happened. I had heard about the story, and actually I was a little bit slow on the uptake about it. because when I went to the site, usually what we do, we're a very video heavy group. So what I would normally do is go and take the video from the school board meeting and post them having the conversation, and that would be what we use, but they didn't record it. They only had the minutes, but the minutes hadn't been posted yet. So I called one of the guys who actually spoke in favor of the book, and I said, where are the minutes? And he said, well, it's 20 pages long, so we're still going through it to make sure they're all right. And he's like, but frankly, I'm surprised that we haven't heard more about it. And I was like, well, yeah, I am too. It took a teacher reaching out to us. So we always say to people who watch our stuff and amplify our stuff, you are the holler. And this was an instance of that being true.
Huh.
You know, without that teacher that reached out to us, this doesn't happen. So I really encourage people just not to assume, and to, you know, reach out to us or whatever local news site and make sure that things get picked up. So when you saw this, right, I guess Jake sent it to you or whoever sent it to you, what was your first thought when you heard that this was happening to your book?
Well, I don't think it's the first time, but I don't keep track of it very often. So all I know is my barometer is there's a bookstore I use all the time in New York City called The Strand. Great bookstore.
I know it well.
And every year they have a banned books table around Banned Book Week, and Mouse is always on it. So I know that something's going on somewhere. But I really don't keep tabs on what's happening and where. The only one I was made fully aware of was the one that took place in the Soviet Union. No, what do they call it now? Russia.
Yeah.
Where Putin tried to ban the Russian edition of the book in 2015. For similarly high-minded reasons to what seems to be the either the fig leaf or the actuality of what went down at the school board in MCMINN, which was he didn't want any swastikas on any book covers for Victory Day or whatever the celebration was, and threatened jail for anybody who displayed or showed such a thing. So Mao's got swept up in what was otherwise, I think, intended to keep, I don't know, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion or Mein Kampf or books like that from being out, I think. But the result was, as often happens with banning books in one way or another, is there's workarounds until you get the people who have written the books and read the books burned, and burned all the books. You've got the banning of the books creating an appetite for what the heck is going on here? Why is this being banned? So the Russians were very happy, the small publisher that took on Mao's in translation, because they sold out immediately and have been reprinting ever since. So,
well, and on that note, we should point out, I believe this is from Judd Lagoon, who I follow greatly. This was yesterday, posted that Mouse, you're saying Mouse. I've been saying Mouse, but I think it might be Mouse hearing you say it, is currently sold out on Amazon. So it was a rush to purchase them. And we got inundated with people saying, how do we send this book to students in MCMINN County? And actually there is a Knoxville comic book store called Nirvana that's giving out copies. There's a church offering to have books sent there. A lot of people have been wanting to help now get this book into the hands of kids there. And even locally, Tennessee Wesleyan, the library there, posted it front and center on Holocaust Remembrance Day and posted "Be Vigilant Against Censorship." That's in MCMINN County in Athens. So there has been a backlash to this. Now you touched on something, and I think you've been pretty generous in your interviews about it. And I want to know, what your feeling is, because you read the minutes and you saw that it was really a focus on swear words and on, the nudity, the mouse nudity. Do you think that was genuine? Or
well, I can't tell from this distance. It's very possible, because they seem to be quite consistent. So either that, or they took the 2 weeks before they sent you the minutes or made them available to whitewash or rewrite their meeting. I don't think so. I think my first response was part of the culture war. It's like those blankety blank people in the red states. What's the matter with those people? And not even being able to quite get my brain around the problem was these mild curse words that are not everywhere in the book. They're very specifically placed insofar as I could find the ones they were referring to. And I think I was most flabbergasted by the reference to what they called a nude woman. I would call a naked body. because it's the corpse of my mother that I think they're referring to, dead in the black ink that represents the blood in the bathtub where she had
Do you mind
killed
if I pull it up? Because I have it
her.
here.
I think it's appropriate, absolutely.
So
Because
here is the illustration that he's talking about. You probably, if you're watching at home,
not on that page, is it? I don't see it.
it's right there, top left.
Oh, I don't see the top left on my screen. Okay.
No, it's isn't that it right there?
No,
She's in the
page
bathtub?
4. You're on page 1 of a 4-page story.
Oh, okay. So maybe I don't have it there. I thought that's what it was, but that is a nude image. She's lying in the bathtub. There's blood on the floor.
Say naked and nude are probably different words.
Yeah.
So I think the naked body is visible with. I could put it up on my screen if you have a way to invade it and show it. I don't know. Maybe
I don't. But anyway, we get the point. It's still an illustration.
It's a very small image. It's a very impacted image. It's got the character representing me in his own Auschwitz uniform, slumped over after feeling the guilt of both my mother's suicide and the anger of family and friends blaming me for it because I was such a bad son. And so as I'm trying to get my brain around what's going on, there's me in oh, I know what I'm going to do. Bear with me for a second.
You hold it up.
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay. Perfect. So this is that page. Can you see that? The second panel over here?
Yes.
That's the nude body that has created.
Right. It's pretty much the same image, actually. Yeah. Okay, I see it.
It's the image.
Yeah.
It says menopausal depression with that picture on top, then a row below it with a wall of bodies that have been shot. Hitler did it. Below that, a young version of me and being put to bed by my mother reading some book to me that says mommy. And then below that, her with her Auschwitz number showing slashing her wrist, which is all I could envision at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it has the word bitch, which I understand was whited out to be B, which I guess could mean bubble. I don't know.
One of the things that they talked about, Art, was could they just redact it? How would you have felt if they just did that instead?
I'd be unhappy. You know, this book, I got to tell you that this book was not meant as a teaching tool. I never did it that way. I think, though, that as a result of not meaning it as a teaching tool, it's probably one of the most effective books to be used in this context, because I saw in some pan of an image you showed, like there's some Anne Frank book out that's a graphic novel version that's better drawn than the 3 or 4 other graphic novel versions of the diary, that it, in and of itself is probably on a 3rd or 5th grade level, doesn't need the pictures, but it was done probably to make it a teaching tool. Mm-hmm. By not being a teaching tool, it did what I wanted to do, which was be in an I-thou relationship with each reader. And that meant being pretty honest about myself, about my parents, and about what I could understand of what happened in a rather layered way. So at the time I started it in 1972, a 3-page version of Mouse, which is actually available for free in the box sets of Mouse that are out now. It's a booklet. So this was a 3-page strip that appeared in an underground comic called Funny Aminals that Robert Crumb did the cover of, and I would not recommend being used as a teaching tool anywhere for other reasons than the Mouse story. But that was so much unfinished business when I managed to locate that as a subject that I returned to it in about 1978 when I moved back to New York from San Francisco, and it led to a 13-year project to make those 2 volumes. In the longer version, I tried to make the drawing quieter. I was not trying to make a violent book. In fact, wherever I could avoid showing violence and not undercut the story, I did. And I was very aware that I was wrestling with my parents as well as with history. And it was born of the desire to find out how on earth could I have ever been born, considering both my parents were supposed to be dead before the year I was born in. And that was the quest that set me on conversations with my father, where we found a safe zone to talk without arguing with each other, which was his memories, and went on until he died 5 years later about. And the goal was to really make it what one reviewer back in the time, who's become a good friend because he wrote such a good essay about Mouse when it first hit the world in volume 1, he described the book as having a crystalline ambiguity. Like I wanted to push to the edge of what I could know and no further. It wasn't about extrapolating beyond what could be fully documented or what was being told to me by my father. And there are conversations about what he's telling me, visual conversations as well about what's true, what could not be true, so that you can question it throughout and figure out where we're going. Now, those things are incredibly sophisticated, but it means that one can get a lot out of a first reading. And at the time I was working on that long book, the word graphic novel barely existed. It wasn't in any currency whatsoever. I think it was Mao's Watchmen and maybe The Dark Knight that all of a sudden had a bunch of articles saying, gosh, wow, comics aren't for kids anymore. So in that context, this was a way of making a long book, which took 13 years to make, to try to find out the right way to make a long book of comics. There wasn't that much precedent for it. And what I thought should be called a long comic book that needs a bookmark and asks to be reread, but it's not as catchy a marketing phrase as graphic novel. So I had to give in. But even so, when Mouse first came out, there was barely a phrase like that to support that notion. Now it's become a norm, and a lot of graphic novels are taught in schools, and a lot of graphic novels, alas, are being banned in schools.
It's so accessible, right? Like, this is what someone like me who, I used to read, but I definitely was more interested in the visuals, and it just makes it so accessible. So when they sit there having that conversation about, is there anything else we can find as a substitute instead? I mean, good luck finding something.
When I did Mouse, like I was just explaining, it was an anomaly. There wasn't any other book to compare it to. It got rejected by virtually every publisher who saw it, including the one who did publish it, Pantheon, on a second submission through an art director friend of mine who worked in Random House named Louise Feely. And the publisher said, yeah, we can do that. We do lots of books that don't sell many copies. So they took the chance on this thing, and it worked out. But it wasn't obvious that it would work out, and it wasn't obvious that there was room for such a book, and it certainly wasn't being taught when it first came out. But now it's taught in so many places, including someone I just talked to from the local NBC affiliate who had studied it when she was in 8th grade herself, somewhere in Illinois. So the idea that it's beyond comprehension for an 8th grader in MCMINN County is a terrible self-indictment on their part to say that they can't match a national level of reading and thinking ability, and they're shortchanging their children as a result.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. And just to put it in context, it's not just this book. We have these Moms for Liberty chapters here strongly fighting for book banning in a lot of our different counties. Actually, just got one called Walk Two Moons removed in Williamson County, which is actually where I live. I want to ask you on a more general level, these book banning conversations and censorship in general, you just touched on it, saying that it actually hurts our kids. Do you think it's just a lack of trust in kids in general? And
Absolutely.
What is that impulse people have?
They want to protect their children. Like when I got into the woods on this thing and read the 20 pages of the minutes, I got to have these conflicting narratives in my head. One is, are they just trying to say stuff that can be sayable without saying, look, we don't want these Jewish values being inculcated in our fine Christian children. But there are some leaks in the document that indicate that's part of it. They were disturbed by pictures of hanged mice representing humans. They were disturbed by children being killed. Well, they wanted, ultimately what they said they wanted was a nicer Holocaust. A friendly, cozier Holocaust to study than the one that actually historically happened. And I don't want them to be taught a whitewashed Holocaust, especially. And I don't want them to make me any more cuddly than I actually am not. So that the responses that aren't generous on my part to my father and sometimes to my mother are part of the story. So I think they were just trying to protect their kids in a very myopic way, because you don't protect kids by lying to them, by dumbing it down for them. It's a matter of what you just said before, Justin, which is trust the kids. They're open to being taught when somebody's doing it honestly. And I think even when I think about the word banned, it's sort of banned. It's being taken off the curriculum.
Right.
Presumably, they're not burning the copies in the school library or in the local libraries, which now have a surfeit of mice.
Well, there was a bit of a debate over the word ban, but I looked up the word itself, and it's to prohibit in an official capacity, and that's what they did.
No,
So
no. They
I'm
did it.
very comfortable using that word,
Okay,
frankly.
so they did it. I can buy in. I just don't. What I don't want to buy into. Wait, we should finish the last stuff, but I got
Sorry,
derailed. Where was I? What was I talking to
you were
exactly?
talking about protecting kids.
Protecting kids, yeah. So in trying to protect kids, they're actually damaging these kids. And I think it's a bigger problem because there's no reason for these mothers to be protecting their children by taking over the school curriculum. Like you can look back at your Scopes monkey trial that took place nearby almost 100 years ago and find that they were just trying to stop evolution from being taught, because how could it happen in a mere 6,000 years, which was, according to the Bible, the history of the world. So you don't want these people hijacking the discourse. You want public schools teaching in a public way for a national discourse and national unity to happen. It requires having an agreed upon set of facts, and it might start with the idea that evolution might be worth looking at and that the world might be older than 6,000 years old, and to insist on the literal level of the Bible might not be the best compass in the late 20th, early 21st century. And that would involve paying your teachers better, making sure these kids are taken care of well, if some of them are in foster homes, as seems to be, giving them the extra education they need if they're not at reading level. And that requires what you were saying. And I'll be glad to donate the money that comes from extra Amazon sales if that'll help change the system. Because the system is and that
From your
system,
lips to God's ears with that. Absolutely.
the
That's
system doesn't have room for these kibitzers, if you'll pardon the phrase, who are
right.
well-intended or politically agenda-intended censors. It's not.
Well,
There's
the
no.
thing that I would counter to them, they always say, okay, this is parents taking control of, parents' choice and parents taking control of education, but they already have a veto or a check on this stuff, and it's when they vote for school board. And when you elect your school board, they make these decisions. It's not by saying, wait, it's not going how we want it, we now need to come in, and you know what I mean? So that's what's
Probably
going on in a lot of these places.
probably overdue in McMinn County based on reading the minutes. They just don't seem very well educated, this particular school board. And even with good intentions, they've muddied up a situation and now found themselves at the very least embarrassed by what they did, thanks to your reporting. But I don't want to see, I guess it's the main reason I'm on here. I don't like being one more bit of cannon fodder in the culture war. I think this is really unhealthy, because the knee-jerk reaction I had is what I was seeing on Twitter when I was able to have time to tune into it a bit, which those stupid Nazis in Tennessee. I'm not sure that that's what they are. I'd have to talk with them. I don't think that's right. But they are stupid on some level. I mean, they're not educated very well. If their way of protecting is to prohibit the few images that they were pointing to and the few words that they were pointing. Great harm capable of happening if the kid reads the word goddamn, in the context of a book that is not endorsing either bad language or even nudist colonies. It's not about that. The Holocaust is not about those things. And they have a book that works. It seems to work on every level, from kids younger than 8th grade to postgraduate studies in schools. People have found it because they need to know, they're interested, well outside a Jewish community that's pledging that this should never happen again, where I just want to make sure that you're talking about never to anybody, not just to Jews. And it doesn't agendas that these, what's that organization called, Mothers for Freedom, or
Moms for Liberty, Moms for Ignorance, I call them.
Okay, those moms are just as upset about teaching anything about the actualities of slavery, about what happens when one's gender impulses have been thwarted by society around it, what's happened to our indigenous Americans who were here way before we got to have Moms for Liberty or whatever in place. And those things need to be taught if we're going to have a better world. The world isn't going to be made better by accusing the school board of being Nazis. It's not going to be made better by them thinking that you and I are here with our horns carefully invisible under your hat and my remaining hair. It's not about a Jewish cabal or Nazis at its core, even though it spills over into issues that are troubling. What's most important is to find ways to make these kind of dialogues possible and avoid going from culture war to Civil War II, which is certainly one of the possible future scenarios for America now.
Well, I think it's really admirable that you're extending that grace, and I agree with you. I mean, we didn't post the story like, look at these Nazis. That wasn't how it felt, but we did post it in the context of the culture wars, the book banning, and I think part of the downside of having that all going on is when something like this happens, it's impossible not to view it in that context. So, that's the challenge. Go ahead.
But the challenge is also to try to make very difficult distinctions. When I was asked either by you or probably on the last interview, what have you learned? And I said, I'm still learning, because my issues include the culture war that is very easily broadcast via Fox News of like, well, they're at it again. They're banning comedians. And actually it becomes a very effective recruiting tool for people who, like me, are First Amendment fundamentalists. I believe that anything could be taught in a school, as horrific as it is, including, say, the Turner Diaries, as long as you have a damn good teacher at the helm.
Right, and they don't seem to trust teachers. I mean, that's the other part of this. What's also going on here is a straight up war on public schools. They're trying to steer public dollars to private schools through the guise of school choice. So they don't trust teachers, and a big part of this is ginning up animosity towards public schools and teachers.
But the flip side, I agree with you 100%. The flip side of it that I was just trying to get my brain around is, for at least the last, it seems like 20 years or more, Huckleberry Finn is being challenged in libraries and schools everywhere because of the N-word in it, right? I don't think it's a crime of the same kind, but it's really hard to get your brain around what is at stake there and why it's being done and what's happening under the surface, because I don't want Huckleberry Finn being banned. It was an important book for me. I understand that the word was current. The N-word was current at the time, but Jim is quite an amazing figure in the book. He's hardly what one would associate with that phrase, that N-word Jim, to just be polite
right
on the air. But he's hardly that. And that's clear in the text that Mark Twain was writing in the late 19th century without the sophistication we have now. With the sophistication we have now, there's no reason to quarrel with that book. There's good reason to teach it. And on, that being an early example of something that has a million examples now. But it's a shooting war between what can be said, what is true, that is a very big one in our society right now. And I would like to get to a place where we can have, if not a common core of what books to read, at least a common core of what reality might consist of and why things are being done. And censorship is not the way through.
Censorship is not the way through. I think that's really well said. Just to tell you about one other thing that's been happening here, that is also sort of inescapable context, is we had and you mentioned that it's not just about when this happens to Jews, it's when it happens to anybody. Well, there was a discriminatory bill passed that basically allows state-backed adoption agencies not to adopt to LGBT people. And it's actually now being used against a Jewish couple who is suing because this state-backed adoption agency refused to let them adopt a baby because they're Jewish. So they're now suing. So when Governor Lee stood up and gave his Holocaust Remembrance Day speech yesterday, it was impossible not to think about that couple, the Rutan Rams, who are suing for that reason. What's your general feeling? And then I'll let you out of here. And I really do appreciate you spending all this time with us about, anti-Semitism in the world and in this country. And do you feel like it is on the rise again? Where is it related to where it was earlier in your life?
It's clearly on the rise again. I mean, anybody who's getting the news anywhere from the center of USA Today on over is reporting on things that are happening in other countries and in America that make it clear that we've created a dangerous and volatile situation for every minority group in America and in the world. And it's a worldwide tendency to say, that democratic experiment, it didn't work out too well. Let's go back to a strongman leader that will make America great again. Mm-hmm. If you say make America great again without figuring out when that America great moment was and when it could be improved, you're just involved in snowing people and getting them ginned up because that way they'll feel they're better than somebody else. It's not it's not useful. All it can lead to is what I'm afraid of in one of these alternate universes. We already entered into one, which was the 2016 election. And I don't want to go into further alternate matrix-like universes where we're in a shooting war between states. And that's what actually is being proposed in order to make sure that they, meaning me, will not replace them, meaning them. So it's clearly on the rise, and it's being encouraged with dog whistles. And that's what I thought even your piece might have been, when I didn't understand why it was held for 2 weeks until the conversation.
No, I swear, I promise it wasn't that.
I don't want this to be ginned up further. It's too useful to forces that are very destructive. And we don't need that. It's not a good idea. We have to find a place where we can at least agree that there's some uses to the Constitution. There's some places where we should adjust it, but it's not in places where we're keeping foreigners out and keeping natives of America subjugated by horrible class barriers that can't be climbed. I mean, that's not a matter of being some kind of red baiting creature or being a commie. It's just like, that's the reality we're facing, and I don't want to see it continue down that road, and would like to make sure that teachers aren't and parents aren't buying into anything that creates that reality. I know that there's probably suspicion of Jews within that county, and there's certainly suspicions of Northerners like me in that county and people who weren't born in America, all of that stuff, and that's got to be quelled if we're going to have a decent future. And it's not out of self-interest, it's in the interest of the people who are buying into these lies themselves.
Art, thank you so much for joining us today, man. I really do appreciate it.
Soapbox, but
no, that's what I was hoping for. And I think somebody just posted it's one of our best interviews. I completely agree. I'm really thrilled that you were able to do this. You mentioned that you were going to try to get involved with MCMINN and have a conversation with them. Let us know how we can help lift that up.
Great. So at some point they'll get back in touch with you. I think there's church groups, synagogue, some educators, and a comic book store that you mentioned earlier. And somebody on my behalf is trying to organize all this into one event, because I can't move to, and wouldn't want to necessarily move to Tennessee and do this on an ongoing basis. But there's room for one important dialogue to take place, and I'd love to be part of it.
Well, I will back channel with you and either put you in touch with some people in McMinn County that I think can help with that, or I can help with that. However we can help facilitate, I'm happy to do it.
Solid. Thanks a lot, man. Be well.
Thanks, Art. Take care. Art Spiegelman, ladies and gentlemen. That was pretty cool. Really appreciate him doing that. Really appreciate you guys commenting along. Always great to have you here. I think by now you all know the story, but Mouse was, whatever word you want to use, removed, banned by the McMinn County Schools. We found out about the story from a teacher. We put it up. It took off. It's been all over the place. It was on the New York Times, who we are grateful mentioned us in there, and Joy Reid talked about it. It's been everywhere now. And, you know, it's more of this censorship, more of this book banning. It's really not the way forward. It doesn't trust our kids. It doesn't trust our teachers. And, you know, I think it's good that we're having a conversation about it. Art has been really gracious, I think, about taking them at their word that they're really focused on the cursing and the drawing, and not, you know, just assuming, which I think is easy too, that this is, you know, Nazis who don't want Jewish content in their curriculum. I had the same feeling. I mean, again, my grandparents survived Auschwitz and Buchenwald, and I came at this story with that lens, and it wasn't the sense I got either. And I've spent enough time in rural Tennessee to know that, you know, this can be genuinely how they were feeling. But I would ask them to think about, you know, whether or not they're bringing other perspectives to this, whether or not maybe there's sort of a missing piece to this. I mean, I don't think there were any Jews in that room when they made that decision. I know there were no Holocaust survivors. So, you know, you're making a decision to essentially eliminate a perspective that you're not replacing with anything even close. And who gets hurt? The kids get hurt. And that's who gets hurt in all this. And that's who gets hurt. Same thing's happening in Williamson County right now. The Moms for Liberty just got Walk Two Moons banned, but they're not done. They're going back again to try to get Ruby Bridges banned. And I'm using banned because I'm intentionally using that word. They don't like it, but I'm using that word. banned, and a Martin Luther King book banned, March on Washington. And my kid is in that county. So that will take it out of my kid's curriculum. And I take that personally. And that's why we post about that issue so much and that group so much, because that's hurting our kids. And it's because of their fragility. It's because of their closed-mindedness, their fear. And our kids are the ones that get hurt. And our kids can handle it. We need to trust our teachers. We need to be better about supporting our public schools. We're 44th in the country when it comes to public school funding. That is unacceptable. That is completely unacceptable. So it's impossible not to view this all as part of a whole. You know, even if McMinn County was really concerned about goddamn and bitch and mouse boobs, it's part of a whole. It's a culture, a climate of censorship. Coach Hahn in East Tennessee getting fired for talking about white privilege. They talked about language there also and ended up robbing the kids of a really good teacher, as though these kids don't have access to everything. I'm going to pull up a tweet from a friend of mine. This is Joey Piazza. He said, again, I can't stress this enough. Your kids have access to the full internet and TikTok. Books are not your problem. That's the truth. Joey is absolutely right about that. And if you think that doing this to these books is going to somehow keep your little kids from learning about these things, it's not going to. It's going to make them. I mean, look what happened to Mouse just now. Everybody bought the book. That's all you're doing. You're just shining a light in the places that you don't want people to look. I mean, the seahorse thing, I don't even get me started on that. Anyway, the bottom line is this is not the answer. Censorship is not the answer. Censorship hurts our kids. And I really appreciate that Art came on here, that he wrote this book. If you want to see the interview, I see somebody saying, did I miss it? Yes, you did. But once we're done, you can scroll back. It'll be on our site. We'll post clips. Really appreciate everybody coming on here. I think this was one of our best interviews. We'll try to do more like it. And we are able to do this because of your support. So a deep and sincere thank you to everybody who's chipping in monthly to the Holler, to everybody who amplifies all of the things that our Hollers say across the state. We have 10 of them, and that's all because of your support. And then again, you are the Holler. This straight up would not have been a story had a teacher not reached out to us and said, hey, did you hear McMinn County just banned mouse? And we were like, no, what are you talking about? And that's how this happened. So this happened because of you. So please keep an eye out. Please stay in touch with us. Please send us stories. And we so appreciate all the support you've given us over the last 3 years. And we're not going anywhere. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.